What if I told you that a single wild horse, discovered on a patch of worthless swampland, would spark a legal battle that lasted 7 years, divided an entire community, involved state and federal agencies, and ultimately changed wildlife protection laws forever? This isn't a story about money or land. It's about freedom, heritage, and the question of who really owns the wild. This is the incredible true story of how one magnificent stallion named Spirit became the center of a war between developers, conservationists, ranchers, and the government. And it all started with a man who bought the cheapest piece of land in the county. Our story begins with Jack Morrison, a man in his mid-50s with weathered sun-damaged skin that spoke of decades working outdoors. He had steel-gray hair that was thinning on top, a lined face with deep crow's feet around his brown eyes, a prominent nose, and a thick gray mustache. His build was stocky and barrel-chested, standing about 5'9" with strong, calloused hands from years of manual labor. Jack had worked in construction for 30 years, saving every penny he could. He'd always dreamed of owning land, real land, not just a house on a suburban lot. In 2015, at age 54, Jack finally had enough for a down payment. But property in Collier County, Florida, wasn't cheap. Beachfront? Forget it. Developed areas? Way out of his budget. Then his real estate agent, a slick-talking woman named Rebecca Chen, showed him something different. "It's 40 acres, Rebecca said, spreading a map across her desk. She was an elegant woman in her early 40s with straight black hair cut in a sharp bob, almond-shaped dark eyes behind designer glasses, a slim professional build in a tailored navy suit, and perfectly manicured red nails. And the price is, well, it's practically nothing. $20,000. Jack's eyes widened. That was a fraction of what other properties cost. "What's wrong with it?" he asked suspiciously. Rebecca hesitated. "It's wetlands. Swamp, technically. You can't build on most of it. Can't develop it. It floods seasonally. Honestly, Jack, most people wouldn't want it." But Jack saw something different. He saw privacy, nature, a place where he could put a small cabin on the only high ground, maybe run some chickens, live simply. "I'll take it," he said. Rebecca looked surprised, but she wasn't going to talk him out of a sale. 3 weeks later, Jack stood on his property for the first time as the legal owner. The land was, well, it was rough. Saw palmetto and wiregrass covered most of it. Cypress trees rose from standing water in several areas. The high ground was maybe 3 feet higher than the surrounding swamp, enough to stay dry most of the year. It wasn't much, but it was his. As Jack walked the property line, using a GPS unit to mark the boundaries, he heard something. A splash, then a snort. He turned toward the sound and froze. There, standing knee-deep in the marsh water about 50 yards away, was a horse. Not just any horse, a magnificent stallion, completely black except for a small white star on his forehead. The horse stared at Jack with intelligent dark eyes, nostrils flaring. He was wild, clearly, with a tangled mane full of burrs and mud caked on his legs. But his bearing was regal, proud. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the stallion tossed his head and disappeared into the thick vegetation. Jack became obsessed with that horse. Over the next few weeks, as he cleared a small area for his future cabin, he saw the stallion several more times. And he wasn't alone. There was a small herd. 3 mares and 2 younger horses, probably yearlings. They moved through the swampland like ghosts, perfectly adapted to the terrain. Jack learned to recognize each one. The stallion, who he started calling Spirit, was the clear leader. There was a bay mare with a gentle face, a gray mare who seemed to be the oldest, and a younger paint mare with brown and white patches. The yearlings stayed close to the mares, learning the ways of the swamp. Jack did some research. Turns out, wild horses had lived in this part of Florida for hundreds of years, descendants of Spanish horses brought over in the 1500s. Most had been rounded up or died out over the centuries, but isolated groups survived in remote areas. His swampland, apparently, was one of those areas. Jack thought his horses were his little secret. He was wrong. One morning, about 6 months after he'd bought the property, a black Mercedes SUV pulled up to his property line. Out stepped a man in his late 30s with slicked-back blonde hair, a sharp jawline, cold blue eyes, and an expensive charcoal suit that seemed ridiculous for a swamp. This was Marcus Thornton, and he had a slim athletic build, perfect teeth in a practiced smile, and an air of entitlement that Jack immediately disliked. "Mr. Morrison?" "Marcus Thornton, Thornton Development Corporation." He extended a hand with a Rolex gleaming on his wrist. "I'm here to make you a very generous offer for your land." Jack crossed his arms. "Land's not for sale." Marcus's smile didn't waver. "Hear me out. $60,000. That's 3 times what you paid. You'd make a nice profit for doing absolutely nothing." "Not interested. Mr. Morrison, let me be frank. I'm assembling a 500-acre parcel here. I have options on every surrounding property. You're the last piece. I'm prepared to go up to $75,000. What do you want with swampland?" Jack asked. Marcus's eyes gleamed. "With the right permits, wetlands can be mitigated, filled, developed. I'm planning luxury eco-lodges, high-end tourism. This area is about to boom, Mr. Morrison, and you're sitting on a gold mine if you know how to play it right." "And the horses?" Jack asked quietly. Marcus looked confused. "Horses? The wild horses living here." Marcus actually laughed. "Oh, those. Yeah, we're aware. Fish and wildlife will round them up when we start development. They'll be relocated or auctioned. Standard procedure." Something in Jack's chest tightened. "My answer is no. Land's not for sale at any price." Marcus's smile finally faded. "Mr. Morrison, I don't think you understand how development works. With or without your cooperation, this area is changing. You can profit from it, or you can be the stubborn old man who stands in the way. Your choice." "I've made my choice. Get off my property." The war had begun. Jack built his cabin. It was small, just 600 square feet, but it was sturdy and it was his. He used every skill he'd learned in 30 years of construction. The horses watched him work from a distance, gradually growing accustomed to his presence. Spirit, especially, seemed curious. The big stallion would sometimes stand at the tree line, just watching Jack hammer or saw. Jack started leaving apples and carrots on a stump at the edge of his clearing. They were always gone by morning. Slowly, very slowly, the horses began to trust him. The bay mare was the first to eat while Jack was present, though she kept a good 50 feet between them. The yearlings were next, their youthful curiosity overcoming their fear. Spirit remained aloof, watching but never approaching. Jack respected that. He wasn't trying to tame them, he just wanted to coexist peacefully. But peaceful coexistence was about to become impossible. 3 months after Marcus's visit, Jack woke to the sound of engines. He walked to his property line and his stomach dropped. Surveyors were working on the adjacent property, the land on 3 sides of his 40 acres. There were trucks, equipment, men in hard hats marking points with flags and stakes. A tall man in his 60s supervised the operation, George Hendricks, the project manager. He had thinning white hair, a weathered face with a prominent hooked nose, pale gray eyes, and a wiry lean build. He wore khakis and a work vest covered in pockets, and had the no-nonsense bearing of someone who'd managed large projects for decades. "You Morrison?" George called out. "That's me. Just letting you know, we'll be working this perimeter for the next few weeks. We'll try to keep the noise down." "What exactly are you doing?" Jack asked. "Initial survey for Thornton's project. Environmental assessments, soil testing, wetland delineation. Standard pre-development work." "And the horses?" George's expression shifted slightly. Fish and wildlife's been notified. They'll handle it when the time comes. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He had to do something. Jack started making calls. First, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. The woman who answered, Officer Linda Hayes, was professional but not encouraging. She was in her early 40s with short-cropped auburn hair, a square face with a strong jaw, keen green eyes, and an athletic muscular build. She wore the tan FWC uniform with authority. Sir, wild horses on private property are complicated. If the landowner wants them removed, we facilitate that. If they're causing damage or pose a danger, we can intervene. But if you're asking us to protect them from legal development on someone else's land. She trailed off. These horses have been here for generations, Jack insisted. They're part of Florida's heritage. I understand, Mr. Morrison. But unless they're on protected land, our options are limited. I can send someone to assess the situation, but I want to be honest with you. The outcome probably isn't what you're hoping for. Next, Jack called environmental groups. Most were sympathetic but stretched thin. Finally, he reached an organization called Wild Heritage Foundation. Their director, a passionate woman named Dr. Elena Rodriguez, actually seemed interested. Dr. Elena Rodriguez arrived 2 weeks later. She was in her late 30s, with long dark brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, warm brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence, olive skin, and an energetic slim build. She wore field clothes, cargo pants, hiking boots, and a Wild Heritage Foundation t-shirt, and carried serious camera equipment. She had a heart-shaped face with high cheekbones, a bright enthusiastic smile, and an air of someone who genuinely loved her work. Mr. Morrison, call me Elena, she said, shaking his hand firmly. Let's go see these horses. Jack led her to his favorite observation spot. They didn't have to wait long. Spirit appeared first, as he always did, checking for danger before allowing the herd to enter the clearing. Elena's breath caught. Oh my God, she whispered. He's magnificent. For the next 3 hours, Elena photographed and observed the herd. She took notes, recorded GPS coordinates, and asked Jack detailed questions about their behavior patterns. Finally, she turned to him with an expression of determination. Jack, these horses are special. I think they might be descendants of one of the original Spanish herds. If I'm right, they're not just wild horses, they're living history. We need to protect them. Elena didn't waste time. Within a week, Wild Heritage Foundation launched a campaign. They created a petition to designate Jack's swampland and the surrounding area as protected habitat. They contacted media outlets. Local news picked up the story, and suddenly Jack's phone wouldn't stop ringing. A local news reporter, Travis Chin, showed up with a camera crew. Travis was a young man in his late 20s with perfectly styled black hair, a clean-shaven boyish face with friendly dark eyes, a slim build in a sharp suit, and an eager, earnest energy that made him likable despite being a reporter. Mr. Morrison, is it true you're fighting a major development to save wild horses? Jack found himself on the evening news. The story went viral locally, then regionally. Local man protects wild Spanish horses from developers, the headlines read. The petition gathered 10,000 signatures in a week. Supporters started showing up at Jack's property line, some to observe the horses, others to protest the development. Marcus Thornton was not happy. Marcus Thornton held his own press conference. Standing in front of architectural renderings of his proposed luxury eco-lodges, he painted a very different picture. This project will bring 200 jobs to the area, generate millions in tax revenue, and promote ecotourism that will actually benefit conservation efforts. One man's stubbornness and misguided sentimentality shouldn't derail economic progress for an entire community. He had support too. The local Chamber of Commerce backed him. Construction unions backed him. Business owners who saw opportunities backed him. A counter-petition started, Support Progress in Collier County. It got 8,000 signatures in 3 days. The community was fracturing. Pro-development signs appeared on lawns. Pro-horse signs answered them. Town hall meetings became shouting matches. The local newspaper ran dueling op-eds. And through it all, Jack just wanted to be left alone with his horses. Marcus sued. He filed a lawsuit claiming Jack's refusal to sell was causing financial harm and seeking to force a sale through eminent domain. Wild Heritage Foundation countersued, seeking an emergency injunction to halt development pending environmental review. The county got involved. The state got involved. Environmental Protection Agency got involved. Suddenly there were hearings, depositions, legal filings. Jack had to hire a lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia "Pat" O'Connor, in her 50s with short iron-gray hair, sharp blue eyes behind rectangular glasses, a stocky build, and a reputation for winning cases everyone said were unwinnable. She wore no-nonsense pantsuits and had a gravelly voice from years of courtroom arguments. "Jack, I'm going to be straight with you," Pat said in their first meeting. "This is going to be expensive, exhausting, and we might lose. But if you're serious about fighting, I'm serious about fighting with you." "I'm serious," Jack said. "Then let's go to war." In the midst of the legal battles, tragedy nearly struck. Jack woke one morning to find Spirit tangled in barbed wire at the far edge of his property. Old fencing he hadn't known was there, probably decades old and hidden in the undergrowth. The stallion was cut in several places, blood matting his black coat. He was panicked, thrashing, making the injuries worse. Jack approached slowly, speaking softly. "Easy, boy. Easy. I'm going to help you." Spirit's eyes rolled with fear, but something in Jack's voice made him stop thrashing. For 20 minutes, Jack carefully cut away the wire with bolt cutters, strand by strand, while the wild stallion stood trembling but still. When the last wire fell away, Spirit didn't bolt. Instead, he stood there for a long moment, looking at Jack with those intelligent dark eyes. Then he lowered his head and touched Jack's shoulder with his nose. Just once, gently. It was a moment of connection that transcended species. Then Spirit walked slowly back to his herd. Jack sat down in the mud and cried. He knew then that this fight was about more than land or money or even heritage. It was about trust and freedom and the right of wild things to exist. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had a breakthrough. She'd managed to collect hair samples from the horses and sent them for genetic testing. The results came back and changed everything. The horses were indeed descendants of Spanish Colonial horses, specifically, a rare genetic line thought to have been extinct. "Jack, do you understand what this means?" Elena said excitedly, spreading the test results across his small cabin table. "These aren't just wild horses. They're a living genetic treasure. There are only a few hundred Spanish Colonial horses left in the entire world, and your herd represents a unique bloodline. This changes the legal situation entirely." She was right. With genetic proof of the horse's heritage, Wild Heritage Foundation petitioned for endangered species protection. Historical preservation groups got involved. Equine conservationists from around the country rallied to the cause. National media picked up the story. Suddenly, Jack's swampland horses were in the New York Times, on NPR, trending on social media. The stakes had gotten much, much higher. The case eventually made it to a federal hearing. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat Jack, Pat O'Connor, Elena, representatives from Wild Heritage Foundation, and dozens of conservationists and supporters. On the other side sat Marcus Thornton, his team of corporate lawyers in expensive suits, business leaders, and development supporters. Federal Judge Catherine Blackwell presided, a stern woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, a narrow face with piercing gray eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, a thin build, and an expression that gave away nothing. For 3 days, both sides presented their cases. Thornton's lawyers argued property rights, economic impact, and legal precedent. Pat O'Connor argued heritage preservation, genetic significance, and environmental protection. Expert witnesses testified. Biologists, historians, economists, environmental scientists, all giving their professional opinions. Through it all, Judge Blackwell took notes, asked sharp questions, and revealed nothing about which way she was leaning. 2 months later, Judge Blackwell issued her ruling. It was a compromise that satisfied no one but protected what mattered most. The development could proceed on most of Thornton's assembled land, but Jack's 40 acres and a 160-acre buffer zone around it were designated as protected habitat for the Spanish Colonial horseherd. Thornton had to modify his development plan, reducing the size and increasing setbacks. Jack's land could never be sold or developed, even by him. It was now held in trust for conservation purposes. The ruling established legal precedent. Genetic heritage and historical significance could override standard property development rights when living endangered populations were involved. Marcus Thornton called it judicial overreach. Jack called it a miracle. Elena called it a victory for conservation, even if it's not perfect. The 7-year war was over. Today, Jack Morrison is in his 60s. He still lives in his small cabin on the swamp. The Thornton eco-lodges were built, and ironically, the protected horse sanctuary became their biggest draw. Tourists pay premium prices to stay in luxury accommodations where they can observe rare Spanish colonial horses in their natural habitat from designated viewing areas. Marcus Thornton never speaks to Jack, but his development turned out to be more successful than originally planned, partly because of the horses. Spirit is still alive, now old but still the herd's patriarch. The herd has grown to 11 horses, carefully monitored by fish and wildlife. The genetic line that almost disappeared is now being used to supplement other Spanish colonial horse preservation programs across the country. And Jack. He finally has what he always wanted: peace, land, and the company of wild things. Every morning, he sits on his porch with coffee and watches Spirit lead the herd through the marsh. Some wars, he learned, are worth fighting. And some victories belong not to those who win, but to those who refuse to surrender the things that matter most. Like and subscribe for more interesting stories.